Welcome to the Badass Direct Sales Mastery Podcast with your direct sales dom, Jenny Bellinger. Badass Direct Sales Mastery is a podcast for rock star direct sales moms who are determined to make their business kick ass. Jenny will share her knowledge of effective sales and recruiting techniques, tips to get what you want from your business, and will interview direct sales professionals and leaders from various companies. The interviews will give insight to how these rock stars got to where they are and where they plan to grow in the future. And now, the direct sales dom, Jenny Bellinger.
Welcome back to another episode of Badass Direct Sales Mastery. I'm your host, your direct sales dom, Jenny Bellinger, helping you whip your business into shape. And today I have with me Jamie Atkinson. Now, Jamie was introduced to me by my bestie, and y'all know who that is, Virginia Muskies, because she said, this guy knows podcasting and he is blowing my mind. You need to talk to him. And I was like, all right, let's get him on the show. And sure enough, here he is. So Jamie has been in the world of podcasting for quite a long time. He has built a 7-figure business with it and working on turning it into an 8-figure business just through podcasting alone, which I am just sitting here like, oh, let's go. Tell me more. So Jamie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I love Virginia. She's just like a walking Jamie billboard. She just, every time she meets somebody, she just like, I don't know what I did to this poor woman that she's so obsessed with telling everybody about us all the time, but I'm so grateful. She's just the best. I'm like, Virginia, what did I do that makes you say such nice things?
You did the right thing.
I don't know what I did.
Happened. I can tell you right now,
well,
you did the right thing. So you made something right. You did the right thing. And for her, it's always about, and guys, if this is your takeaway from today's conversation, fan freaking tastic. We're all human. We're in business and entrepreneurship. We're going to make mistakes. If you go into something knowing that mistakes and humans are going to happen, life is going to happen, it doesn't matter that mistake happened. What matters is how people clean up. And that's what happened. There was something that I don't even know all the details. I just remember in her discussion of sharing with me about you, there was a mistake that happened when she signed on with you. You called her up, made it right. And she was like, he cleaned up. He cleaned up the way that I teach people to. Yeah, that's what it is.
That was super fun.
That's what you did. You did the right thing. And so that's why I was like, can I get this guy on my show? And she's like, good, because I was going to tell you he should be on your show.
Well, super fun. I'm stoked that I'm here. Yeah. I'm excited. I'm excited.
Good. So tell me, how did you get into the world of podcasting? What got you excited about doing this?
Well, the truth was I sucked. That's it, Jenny. I just sucked. So I was sucking at business. I had like 3 or 4 businesses that just did not hit the ground running. Don't know if you can relate with this. But,
yeah, maybe. We've all been there at some point.
Right. I was trying all these different things. It's kind of a funny story because my sister got really sick and she's better now. But I remember telling my boss, like, hey, my sister's really sick. Do you mind if I take some time to go and like spend time with her? And he was like, no, you have to work. So I was like, well, screw that guy. I'm going to quit my job. So I ended up quitting my job. And my mom told me, she's like, you should travel. You love traveling. So anyway, my mom pushed me to go and travel all around the world, which is hilarious because everybody's mom usually is like, no, what are you doing? Don't do that. So I started traveling and I was like, crap, I need a way to make money if I'm going to live abroad. So for 2 or 3 years, I just, had an online blog and then I became a writer online. I was writing like $28 articles online. And then I got into Pinterest. And so I was like jumping from these things to things as I was like learning these different skill sets. And, I got really stuck at the $2,000 to $3,000 a month level. And for some people, that's like, wow, you can make $2,000 and $3,000. Like, that's great. But for me, I got like stuck at that level for 2 or 3 years. And I went to this marketing conference. And at this marketing conference, they said, you should do a podcast. And I was like, okay, I just gave it complete blind faith. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do a podcast. And I went out, I started a podcast. I did it for 3 months. I made absolutely $0, but I met a bunch of different people. And then the month after that, I started asking the question, well, how do I make money with this? And that actually ended up becoming my first business. And so the reason I got into podcasting as a business owner is that in that fourth month of podcasting, I made $10,000 for the first time ever in my life in my business. And it was all through the podcast. And so people started asking me when I was telling them about it, well, can you show me how to do it? So my first ever business was all around how to make money with podcasting, because that's what I ended up doing. And today now we've expanded out that even further from, hey, you have to be a podcaster to work with us, to now we work with anybody that wants to get on podcasting. But we're still kind of showing them that, those strategies and systems that we've been using all along. So that's my hilarious story about how I got into podcasting. It's because I sucked. So,
well, I love that, because every one of us has our own unique story towards success, and everyone thinks, it's like that meme that goes around on social media, right? So everyone thinks success looks like this, graph that's a straight line from the lower left corner to the upper right. And really what success really looks like is this,
like a pinball machine, just like hitting all the walls and back down again and up again and like slap and, oh, you lost all your money and, oh, you
like
made it all back again.
Like a 3-year-old is
right?
coloring it, right? It's just everywhere until all of a sudden it ends up in the upper
all
right
out of
corner.
The lines. Exactly. Exactly.
So, but that makes perfect sense, because, had you told me when I started my coaching business 7 years ago that I would be doing a podcast as part of my, success plan, I would have laughed you off the face of the planet. I was like, I'm not doing a fucking podcast. I'm not doing it. Like, you've got to be kidding me. I'm trying to coach people here. Excuse me, But once somebody introduced the idea of how you can use it to A, serve your market, and B, be able to then also serve your business at the same time, I was like, this is a win-win. Tell me more, right? And that's what got me into that. So you work with people now, like you said, in helping them understand how guesting on shows can build their business. So let's start there, because that's how I got started. Okay, fine. I'm not going to start a podcast. I'll go be a guest on shows. So that's how I started. By the way, y'all, it's the gateway drug to podcasting.
Right. Yeah. You start guesting. You're like, oh, I should have one of my own. Right. It's
right.
Like kind of naturally progresses that way.
So what are some of the things that, some of the mistakes that people make? Let's start there in guesting on shows that actually hurts them from being able to make money. Let's start there. So that way we can know, okay, don't do that.
Yeah. I think the first thing, and this is a thing that a lot of people do, and if you're listening to this right now, you'll probably raise your hand and say, oh, yep, that's me, is that I think the biggest mistake people make, and it's kind of universal across whatever you decide to do, is you just try and do everything at once and don't really do anything well. And so, I'm going to do a little bit of social media. I'm going to do a little bit of email. I'm going to do a bit of this, a bit of that. And, you do a bit of everything to the point where everything sucks. And I had a call with a lady this morning, just chatting to her. And I was like, well, what are you doing right now? And she told me 11 different things. I'm doing a blog. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And then I asked her the horrible question. I was like, okay, how's that working for you? How many calls did you book this week? How many sales did you make? And she was like, 0, right? I was like, okay, so do you think that stuff is working? And she was like, no. I was like, do you want to do something that will work? And that was kind of our whole conversation. So, the first thing that I really encourage people to think about is, if you're going to commit. Instead of trying to do everything badly, and, it's not like you're trying to do it badly, but focus is so important. If you split your attention even in 2, you go from 100% attention to 50%. It's a giant drop down. You split it in 3, you're now at 33%. You do 10 things, you got like 10%. How on earth can you be effective at something if it's only got 10% of your attention? So the first thing I say to people who want to do podcasting is commit. Okay, you're going to be a podcast guest. Great decision. It's very versatile. You can kind of do them whenever you want. They don't take tons of time. You get in front of new audiences all the time. But commit. Do 2 a week for a year. That's 100 new audiences. Now, that might sound intimidating when you say 100, but if I say, can you commit 2 hours a week to talk to people, right? You don't have to write anything. You don't have to create anything. You just show up and be yourself. You'll soon realize it's the easiest way to get traffic and create content, right? You literally just have to show up and talk. It's the easiest thing in the world. And if you're anything like me or Jenny here, like, you probably can talk for England. So it's pretty easy. People ask you questions, you answer the question. So I think that's the biggest mistake people make to begin with, is that, they try and do too much. And it's much, much, much more effective to just keep it really simple. People say all the time, like, wow, you've built this amazing business. It must be so complicated or fancy. It's like, we do two things, really. We do podcasts and I write an email every morning, and that is it, right? Like, by and large, that is my entire business. But we do really well because we're very good at those two things. So, first, take it really seriously. And the second thing is just like, make it easy for yourself. A lot of the time when people try and get on shows, they are going to people that are not looking for guests. And so, I know this because all of our competitors, this is kind of hilarious, everybody that sells a podcast booking service, every single one of them does it exactly the same way.
Mm-hmm.
They have an army of VAs and they go and pitch podcasters horribly every day, right? Jenny, how many emails do you ignore from people who say, here's my one pager, here's what I would like to do, right? Like, I just don't even open those emails.
I love it. And it always starts out, I'm going to tell you all, this is how all of them start out. I love your podcast episode on insert title here.
Insert cool, awesome title.
Right.
I definitely listened to it.
Yeah, I totally listened to it. Sometimes they're smart enough to say they left me a review. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That then gets me to actually open the freaking email, because I will open it if I see that they reviewed it. But then they immediately jump into, and you should totally have so-and-so on your show because, and then they
my
tell me
amazing
about,
client, Jennifer, right?
Yeah,
it's just
like does blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, there's no way you actually listened to my show and paid attention to the description that says, I talk to people who are in sales. Like, they're pitching me people who are like CEOs
Doctors
talking. Doctors, dentists. I'm like, I've had all kinds of people pitch to me, and I'm like, bleh, no.
So, folks, here's a little inside tip for you. Go to the people. You ever heard that expression where it's like the lifeguard, has to go in the water and it's like, who do I save? And it's like, save the people swimming towards you, right? When it's like, there's 100 people and it's like, who do you pick who to save? He's like, well, whoever's swimming towards me, they clearly want to live. Well, we have the same approach. So instead of going to all these podcasters that aren't looking for guests and don't want to be pitched, what we did was we created a group called Need a Guest. And podcasters come to that group because they need a guest. So they are coming towards you and they go into this group and they post and they say, I am looking for a guest. This is who I'm looking for. And so what we do with both our free people as well as our paid for clients is that we as a company attract all of the podcasters who are looking for guests. And so whether you're a podcaster and you want amazing guests, we've got all of these people that you can pick from. You kind of have the pick of the litter.
Right.
Or if you're a guest, you can come to the people who are looking for, amazing guests. And so for our free clients, they can come into the group, they can consume, go through all of these different posts. And our group only allows 2 posts. You can either post that you need a guest or you can post that you want to be a guest. And so it's kind of like, if you had a job board and it's like, here's all the available jobs. It's kind of like that in the group. It's like, here's all the available shows. Which one do you want to go and comment on to go be a guest? So those are probably my 2 biggest tips to people is one, really just commit to doing one method and, going big and doing it consistently. Because if you get on 100 new shows every single year, you're bringing new people into your world that weren't there before. And I know for direct sales, this is the biggest thing, right? It's like, almost incestuous sometimes. It's like, okay, I'm speaking to my neighbor and my neighbor's daughter and the daughter's friend, and, it all gets a little bit close knitted. If you can go out there and bring new people into your world, it doesn't have to be that way. And then, the whole reason we created Need a Guest was to solve the demand of making it easier. And that's why the group has exploded. We went from 10,000 followers to 60,000 followers in like 10 months. It was absolutely insane how quickly it's grown.
I'm a member of the group because I found out about it and I was like, oh, I want to check this out. I want to see what this is because I have guests on my show and I like to guest on other people's shows to talk about, because I'm kind of a unicorn in the coaching world. There's like 150 people worldwide who do what I do somewhat similarly to what I do. Right. So we're kind of unique in this world, hard to find. So I want to go get on other shows to let people know that, hey, I exist.
Right.
So your sister who's been sucking wind in her network marketing business, send her this episode so she can do better and stop selling to you all the time. Like, right. Is really kind of what I'm going for. So I love in the group that, yes, I absolutely can go in there and I check it out every once in a while to go see, okay, who's posting that they want to be on shows. And then every once in a while I'll be like, ooh, you look interesting. Come on my show. Here's my link, right? But it's also fun to see the different kinds of shows that are in there too, because you guys really do have a plethora of shows.
Oh, it's wild. I mean, we had a show that joined a couple of weeks ago. They're a golfing podcast, 300,000 listeners a week. It's insane. And then, you have giant shows, small shows. You've got all of these different kind of shows. There's a huge mix of people.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. Oh my gosh. I'm sure if my grandparents were still alive, they'd be all over that golfing podcast.
It's a good show as well. Really, really cool show. Right.
Cool. Well, that's awesome. So with all of this, in starting with the guesting piece, right? What about the people who do what I did and go, wow, this guesting thing's kind of cool. I wonder what would happen if. And then we get that wild hair and decide to start a show, right? What are the benefits because for me, it compounded, right? All of a sudden I went from being on people's shows to now suddenly getting the expert level credibility, at least for me. How do you walk people through that process of launching their show?
What I think is kind of interesting is that when you have your own show, it's kind of a beacon of your own credibility. The main reason I like having my own show is kind of as a leverage tool. Not only am I going to have listeners, but I now have something of value that I can bring you on. And so it doesn't matter whether you're a high profile speaker, a high profile entrepreneur, if you've got an event, if you've got a network, anytime we want to get in with anybody, the first thing we do is invite them on our show. And so, the bigger the show you have, the more valuable that is. And so one of the things that we really encourage, podcasters to think about, like take your show, for example, Jenny, if you wanted to grow your show, one of the best ways that you can grow your show is actually to go on other shows that are like yours. And, you can go and do a guest interview. You can do podcast swaps. These are really cool, where you would do, say, like a 10-minute episode and you would put it on their feed and they would put one on your feed. And, you kind of like do a trial episode. It's like, if you enjoyed this, go listen to the rest of the show. Right. Kind of like, like a radio show will do sometimes.
Yeah.
But, listeners to podcasts like to listen to podcasts. So one of the best ways that you can get new listeners is to go out on other shows. We were just at an event in Orlando in January, Podfest. Shout out to Podfest. Yeah. And, it was so fun for me and Angel because everywhere in every room, when people asked the question, how do I grow my podcast? The answer was get on other shows. And we were like sponsoring the event and it was like, need a guest, get on other shows. It was like perfect for us. It was like a huge advertisement, but it's right. It's one of the best ways to kind of get exposure. So I don't always recommend doing your own show as the first thing because there's a bit of a commitment there. You have to do it every week. There's, I don't edit my shows, but sometimes people want to edit them or they, stumble over their words and have to edit them. So it's a really big commitment. And so one of the things that we encourage our clients to do is one, if you don't have an existing audience, starting your own show first doesn't make a huge amount of sense.
Yeah.
You don't have any listeners. So you're going to do this show and you're going to be spending all your time presenting to the universe and nobody else.
Right.
It's kind of like to nobody. So one of the things that we always recommend for people to start off with is like, well, step one, go get on other shows because they already have an audience. So you go get in front of other shows, you start to build up your audience. The second thing we encourage people to do is actually to create a private podcast. So these are little 3-episode mini series that you can create where people have to give you an email address, or sometimes you can even charge them to go through this mini series. And, it's still kind of like you've got a podcast, but you don't have to do an episode every week. And so those are great little things you can give out when you're on other shows to start building your audience. So now you're going on other shows. You're giving this little mini 3-episode series. It maybe sells some of your products. They come and join your list. And then once you've grown your audience and you've got, 1,000 people on your list, now you can launch your full blown, podcast. And so we encourage people to sort of break it up into these separate components just because it makes a bit more sense. Step one, go get in front of the audiences. Step two, bring them onto your email list and also, maybe get them buying something that you're selling. And then maybe later on you can, do your own show if you want to. But a lot of our clients don't even bother making their own shows anymore. They just have the private shows and they go get on other people's audiences.
That is so freaking brilliant because to me, the having your own private mini podcast basically is what it sounds like is perfect because like you said, podcast listeners like to listen to podcasts, right? And
who'd have thought it, right?
I know. I tell people all the time, I'm like, podcast listeners treat podcasts like potato chips. You can't have just one. Like, I mean, how many times on social media have we seen somebody say, all right, I just got done listening to such and such, crime podcast. What are
What's
other
next?
podcasts?
Right.
Yeah. What else should I listen to next? And then, the litany of all of the podcasts that everybody else in their network listens to shows up there. And every once in a while, I'm always happy if I get tagged.
Right.
Right.
Don't
I'm
forget
not
at
true
home.
crime.
Tag the podcast. Tag the podcast if people are asking, right?
Right. Exactly. Tag the podcast or tag me, tag both. It's all good. No, but I'm not a true crime podcast. I know. That's like the thing that lots of people listen to, but that's okay because most people who also listen to true crime podcasts also have a business of some sort and they want to learn something. Right?
You should like do some crime on your podcast and then someone can make a true crime podcast about your show. Like Jenny had this person on and then a crime happened and it's the first ever podcast related crime. Like you could like tap into it that way, maybe. Don't like murder anyone on a podcast.
Oh, no.
Like,
we'll just murder someone's business. We'll kill it.
Right. And then they make a true crime podcast about it.
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah. We went from this business making nothing to all of a sudden they were killing it.
Literally killing.
Literally killing it. Oh, that is too much fun. Okay. But the reason I love that little pop-up podcast, basically, that idea is because people already have told you they like to listen because they're listening to your episode. So it's brilliant to then give them more audio because here I am like writing stuff and making lead magnets that involve writing or making videos. And I'm like, hello, duh.
Well, let's be honest, how many of you have opened up, an ebook that you've got? Well, no one ever opens them, right?
No one ever opens the ebook.
In the ebook graveyard on our desktop full of all the ebooks that never made it, all those beautiful millions of words that no one reads. So it's like an ebook is useless because no one's going to read it. A video only has 3 to 4% consumption rate, and most people watch the first 10 seconds and then don't watch the rest. But podcasting, 83% of people that start a podcast listen to the whole thing. And you're like, oh, so one of the secrets behind why a pop-up podcast is so effective is just because of the consumption rate. When we have people listening to these 3-episode series, I had one. I don't recommend this, by the way. I usually suggest about 20, 30 minutes for an episode. 3-4 episodes is about right. But I had one pop-up podcast I did that was an hour and a half every episode. One of the episodes was 2 hours. It was a 5-episode series, and 60% of the people who signed up for it, and there was 800 people that signed up for it, listened to all the episodes. So, just for context, that was nearly 10 hours of listen time and we had like 550 people that made it all the way through it. And we made, I think, 40 sales of the product we were selling at the time. So, just putting it in this medium of podcasting, as long as you're interesting and you've got something good to say and they're interested in what it is you're talking about, you can really get a lot of watch time, from these people. You can get a lot of consumption. And I think that's one of the secrets of why this is so effective. When you're bringing new people into your world for the very first time, so many people focus on getting the email address, but that's actually not what's important. It's getting them to consume your stuff. Can you get them to read your emails? Can you get them to listen to your episodes? And so many people mess this up. And, even when we do welcome sequences or emails, I'm a bit of an email nerd. My entire goal in my 10-day welcome sequence is to get people to just like to open the emails. That's it. If I can tell entertaining stories, if I can get them excited about me and my girlfriend and my dog as characters, they're more likely to keep opening the emails, right?
Right.
And so, this is what we really lean into when we're encouraging people to get people onto their list. It's not just about getting the email. It's about what are you giving them that they can actually consume and start to like you as a character. Now, we always say to people, think of it like it's your own Netflix show, right? Why do you watch your favorite shows time and time again? What brings you back for season two,
Mm.
for season three? I don't know if you're a Downton Abbey fan or if there's any Downton Abbey fans here, but people got mad in Downton Abbey when one of the lead actors left after the third season. He was just like, I'm over this, and left. People stopped watching the show. They were like, my character has left, and I now do not care about this series. People fall in love with the characters, not the stories. So one of the things we encourage people to do in their podcast episodes, their series, anything they've got is bring characters, into what you're doing. That's why I talk about it's great in my business because it's me, there's Angel, there's her three children, there's her husband, there's my dog, there's Natasha. We got all these characters that we can build stories around in our business. So people just want to hear what we get up to. I was joking at the start of this episode this morning, funny story. I don't know, drug warning. I don't know. We've been experimenting with microdosing mushrooms, for all these like health benefits or whatever that people are researching. And my girlfriend this morning took too much. And so the poor lady was in the bedroom having like a full on like mushroom overload where she's like, I can smell colors, and it couldn't do any work. So I'll write an email about that. I'll probably do an episode about that, and there'll be hardly any practical value. It will just be a hilarious email about how my girlfriend was freaking out because she tried to microdose and accidentally got really high. And that will make an amazing email, for the only reason being that people fall in love with the characters. They want to hear about what's going to happen next. So, whenever you're looking at your business and you're trying to figure out, what do I talk about? What do I include? One of the things I always tell people is just tell the stories in your life. People care about the mundane stuff. They want to hear about the funny, quirky stuff that's happening. And the more you share your life, every email, every podcast episode, people should know a little bit more about who you are as a person. And the more you start to give away, the more you share, the more people start to love you as a character. And, you become their favorite person, to consume or listen to. A lot of people are like, who's your favorite emails that you read, or who's your favorite podcast you listen to? They're not telling you, oh, it's because of this amazing content or what they say. It's usually because they fell in love with the person, that goes behind it.
Oh, I can definitely attest to that. One of my favorite podcasts is Doug Sandler's Nice Guys on Business. And I sometimes listen to the business stuff, but my favorite episodes are his fuckery episodes, which are him and his best friend, his co-host, Strickland Bonner, shooting the shit, talking about whatever the hell they want to. And it's so much fun because that's my friend Doug, that's my friend Strick talking. And since I can't talk to them, all the time, I can listen to them and connect with them on whatever it was they were talking about that week,
right.
Whether it's cupcakes or whatever random stuff they decided to discuss that week, right?
But you feel like you know them then, right? It's
yeah.
like, Russell Brunson talked about this sometime because he shares a lot about his daughter online, and, strangers would come up to him and like start telling him all of these crazy things about his daughter and like his family. And it's kind of creepy, but also at the same time, you're sharing your life with people on the internet. And that's what really works. You don't want to be this two-dimensional, advertisement for a business with no depth. Humans are broken fundamentally. So the more you share your fucked up shit, the broken things in your life, the more people love it. And your failures, the things that you're so afraid to show, are what make people fall in love with you. I remember we launched a show, actually. This is a funny story. And when we launched this podcast, we had this amazing entrepreneur, Lauren Tickner, one of my friends. She came on the show. And during the episode, she had this poster behind her. She was like in some Airbnb. And as we're talking on the show, this poster just starts to like scratch and scrape audibly and start to fall down.
Oh,
but slowly. It's like a slow, painful fall of this poster. And then 2 minutes in, it's been like falling down, and we keep looking and turning. It finally falls, and it like falls over her head while she's doing this interview. So we just burst out laughing for a full 60 seconds. It's our most downloaded episode. People loved it. People still email me about it to this day because it was fucking hilarious that this poster fell on her head. And, it was a complete botch, but we left it in. And thank God we did, because people love it. They love the stuff that doesn't work, right? It's like outtakes. Everybody loves that.
Exactly. And it's so funny because I tell people like my audience will tell you if they've listened for any amount of time, at some point I will screw up or whatever. I'll mess something up, and my response to it always is to my editing team, leave it in. I want to show people you don't have to be perfect to be a podcaster. Isn't it a good thing you don't have to be perfect to be a podcaster? Because my God, if people expect perfection of me when they meet me in person after hearing my podcast, they are going to be sorely disappointed. Like they are just going to be like, who the fuck is this chick? Because she is human.
This hot mess, right? That's just it, right? But that's why we love the medium. You know, people say to me all the time, why did you pick podcasting? Because it's so easy. You can be yourself. You can make mistakes. It doesn't take a lot of time. You can get in front of new audiences all the time. It's just, I'm just lazy. That's it. I'm this digital nomad traveling guy that doesn't like to work a lot. And that's why we picked it. And it's fun. It's great. I like it a lot.
So much fun. And, really, I mean, for network marketers, right? Because ultimately that's the majority of who listens to my show are network marketers. 50% of your job, you guys have heard me say this before, 50% of your job is to grow your network.
That's it.
How do you grow your network? I chose podcasting. It's a great way because I can use podcasting to go be on other shows. I can bring people on my show. This is how I leverage my relationships with people who may or may not do business the same way I do, but they could offer something to my audience, or I could offer something to their audience because I do something they don't. It's such a fantastic way to grow an audience, grow your network, because then you get this wonderful parasocial relationship where people, like you were talking about, people feel like they know Russell Brunson's daughter because he talks about her so much, right?
Right. And it's so leveraged. I say to people all the time, like, imagine you get to go, and this is great for network marketers because you guys do this stuff. Imagine every day you got to go into a new room full of 100 people and you go on stage and you grab the microphone and they're listening to every word. Well, that's what podcasting is, except you don't have to get out of your chair. You can do it in your underwear if you want to. It's very, very convenient, but you can get in front of huge audiences. We had, like I said, about that golf podcast with 300,000 listeners. It's like, yeah, it's about golf, but like, do any of those golfers also have interest in other stuff? Probably, right? You get on a show like that, you've like made it. So the thing we say to people all the time is, if you imagine these podcast listeners as people in a room, you start to have an appreciation for how many new people you get in front of. Because, I mean, I don't know what other stuff you do, Jenny, but like I used to do a lot of Facebook, right? I would go on Facebook and do posts. It's the same people that you're in. Even when you go into groups, you go to, like, it's the same group of people you're marketing to every single day. But now, like, we never have show overlap. It's like every single show we do is usually a brand new audience. I mean, if you're listening to this right now, tell me if you've ever heard of me before. 99% of you will have never heard of me before. Right. And that's what's cool about this medium. It's just there's a lot of people online. There's a lot of people in the world. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, hello, y'all. We have, I think in November of 2023, the world clock ticker it surpassed 8 billion people in November of 2023. So we now have 8 billion people in the world. There's a lot of people in the world. And in the US, I think the podcast statistics are 60% of Americans have listened to a podcast at some point.
Yeah, and what's crazy is there's like 45, 50% of people listen to podcasts every week.
Every
like
week.
Clockwork. Yeah. It's insane. Like the consumption's through the roof.
Yeah.
And you're right, Jenny. It's crackers how many people consume it. But it makes sense. It's not a new medium. People listen to the radio every single day in their car, like for the last 100 years, Yeah. But the reality is now what's great about podcasting is instead of you having to listen to one big station with the same crap on it that you hate, but you listen to it because it's the only thing, now you can go and pick the very specific show with the very specific thing that you want to listen to, and that's what's great about it. People are used to the medium. It's just accessing it in a different way.
Yeah, it's really, really phenomenal. So
I could get on my soapbox a lot about this stuff.
I was going to say, you and I could talk about this forever, which is why I made sure I was like, please tell me you're going to be on like the podcasters crew so we can just like drink margaritas and talk podcasting and write it off as part of our business. Because how much
I'll take a
fun would
margarita
that be?
write-off. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. That'd be great. So for the people who are listening right now, because not everybody wants to start a podcast. Hello, I was the person who was dragged kicking and screaming into podcasting. And then here I am with the #1 network marketing podcast in the world. Holy shnikes, thou doth protest too much. So for people who are thinking about this and they're going, okay, so I'm sold on being a guest. How do I get started? Where do I go? And I'm going to tell everybody, need a guest on Facebook.
Right.
If you're on Facebook.
Make it easy.
Yeah.
Right. Need a guest. You can go to needaguest.com. One of the things that I would encourage you guys to do is one of two things. One, go consume the stuff that we have. So our Facebook group is kind of unlike any other Facebook group. It's why it does so well. We don't market in that group. You're not going to join and you're not going to get a big pitch or anything crazy. No, we literally go into the group and we show you how to get booked. The group is just podcasters looking for guests and guests looking for podcasters. So one, if you want to get booked, which is a really good idea, make that commitment. Okay, I'm going to do 2 shows a week and go into Need a Guest. You can also go to needaguest.com if you want to find it really easy. But go into the group and we got some guides in there, but you just need to comment on those posts. It's not that complicated. So that's step 1. That's the first thing I would tell you. Go use the resource. The second thing I would tell you is don't just listen to what we say, watch what we do. And any great marketer will tell you it's not what people say, it's what they do that you want to pay attention to. Luckily for us, we practice what we preach. What we tell you to do is what we actually do in our business. But the second thing I would encourage you guys to do is to actually go and experience what we do in our selling process. When we do a podcast interview, we push people to a private podcast. They go through it and they know us, they like us, they trust us, and a lot of people become customers. So what I would recommend you guys do alongside joining the group is if you want to see behind the scenes of how we actually sell when we're on a show like this and we're giving value, go and check out our 3-episode, podcast series, our private podcast, completely free. And it will actually show you what we do inside of our business. I don't usually promote it, but I think for you guys listening who want to actually go get booked on shows and make sales and have success, don't just go and consume it and listen to the advice. Watch what we do inside of it. And if you want to go find that, you can go to needaguest.com/pop-up, POPUP, pop up. I said that right?
Yep.
Pop up.
You got it right. Absolutely. Well, and my badass crew, the listeners who have been listening for 260 something episodes, almost 5 years now, they know to go to the show notes. But for anybody who's new, who just happened to stumble upon this particular episode and they're going, show notes, what's that? Grab your phone, as long as you're not driving. Click on today's episode, scroll up under. Yeah, please don't crash. Please. I really don't need that on my conscience or that energy out there.
Well,
so be safe.
I mean, maybe it would make a good true crime podcast. I don't know, but yeah. Please
It's
don't hurt
Jenny's
yourself.
fault that we crashed. No, so click on today's episode, scroll under Jamie's picture, and you will see the direct link to go get to needaguest.com/pop-up. So you don't have to worry about spelling it right. Does it have a dash? Does it not have a dash? Doesn't matter. Just click the link in the show notes. You can't screw it up. It's that easy. It's in
the group too.
Simple.
It's super easy to find.
And it's in the group, of course. So if you're on Facebook, go to the search function and type Need a Guest. And we'll also have a link directly to the group in the show notes. If you want to make sure that you don't screw it up, it'll go directly there, take you in, join the group, tell Jamie and Angel that you got there because of Jenny Bellinger, the Badass Direct Sales Mastery Show. So that way they know that his time here was totally worth it. And share Jamie.
We'll look after you a bit better. We'll give you a little bit of extra attention and care, Of
course, right? Because who doesn't want the badass crew as part of their group, right? And of course, you guys can connect with me in there because I'm in there because I'm out guesting on other people's shows. I'm always looking for guests. So yes, if you're a member of the badass crew and you want to get on the show and talk about your experience, come find me and Need a Guest and say, I want to be on your show and I'm a listener because I will fangirl over you so hard. I do it every time. So Jamie, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being here and sharing these wonderful, brilliant nuggets of how people can grow their network and get out there a little bit more without having to actually leave the comfort of their own home.
No worries. Just pulled it out of my butt. Nothing planned. Just came on the spot. So glad you guys enjoyed. Hopefully you got something out of it. And yeah, go get on podcasts. If you're lazy like me, it's a great way to grow your business.
Amen to that. I'm right there with you. So I truly appreciate you. And don't forget, crew, check the show notes because that's where you're going to find all the goodies and all the links in order to connect with Jamie and get into the Need a Guest group on Facebook. And Badass Crew, you know how this goes. Stay tuned because there's another badass episode on its way.
Thanks for listening to the Badass Direct Sales Mastery Podcast with your direct sales dom, Jenny Bellinger. Why are you waiting to go to badassdirectsalesmastery.com? Don't make the dom get her whip. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with another rock star that you know in direct sales after you subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. You can also check out the show notes for links and any contact information mentioned in today's episode. We'll see you next time.